price of erasing history. Every mistake vanished, but the toll is collected in the shadows. You do not fix things. You dismantle reality until the failure simply ceases to exist entirely. The tools of the trade? Designed to scrub away the sins of those who sign the paychecks. Step across the threshold. Leave whatever identity you once had out in the freezing hallway forever. Light is the enemy of a secret. The shadows reveal what the naked eye constantly misses. A different wavelength exposes the truth. The dark reality they desperately wanted to keep permanently hidden. The primal red stains everything. It is a loud echo of a mistake that requires absolute silence. Physical deletion is a messy process. Cleaning it up requires a methodical and emotionally hollow approach. Chemical erasure leaves no room for error. Every single microscopic trace must be violently dissolved away. You watch the past bubble and dissolve. It is a mechanical routine devoid of any humanity. Erase the sequence. If you fail to remove the footprint, your own existence will be immediately revoked. Friction destroys the evidence. You rub away the physical remnants until the surface is utterly blank. Calculating the kinetic impact. You must understand the physics of the chaos to properly conceal it. Digging out the metal seeds. Every fragment is a screaming liability that must be sent offline forever. A tiny object that drastically altered reality. Now it is just another piece of cold inventory. Contain the fragments. If one piece escapes this room, your physical deletion becomes an absolute certainty. They constantly monitor the void. Your only worth to the architecture is absolute, unquestionable operational silence. A digital leash attached to your throat. Silence means survival, while static guarantees a permanent end. The heavy shadows linger. You can remove the cold statues, but their absence screams louder than words. Drown the remaining outlines in chemicals. Make sure the foundation forgets that anyone ever existed here. Erasing the physical footprint is only half the battle. The chemical stench permanently stains the mind. You replace one toxic environment with another. The air becomes heavy with burning chemical suppression. A black hole for human errors. Everything inside is scheduled to be permanently removed from reality. Meticulous attention to the mundane. Every single surface is a potential betrayal waiting to happen. The small details tell the loudest stories. A forgotten habit left by a now static figure. No lingering habits. No traces of existence. The protocol demands absolute, unquestionable chemical sterilization. The hardest rooms to clean are the tight ones. Panic always leaves a messy, chaotic signature. The final desperate moments leave stains. Erasing the panic requires absolute detachment from the event. Melt away the desperation. Turn a brutal final stand into just another sanitized plumbing issue. You try to scrub the glass, but the ghosts always stare back from the reflection. Looking at yourself is a liability. Focus on the plumbing, focus on the mechanical destruction. Total structural failure is the only guarantee. Down the drain and out of the timeline forever. The extraction window is closing. You have exactly 3 minutes before the sweepers verify the vacuum. The final sweep. A terrifying moment where a single missed glowing speck equals immediate physical deletion. The silence is heavy. It is the hollow sound of a space where someone ceased to exist. The architecture sends its silent ghosts. A simple nod confirms that the illusion is now reality. Close the heavy door on the nightmare. The room is now just another blank space. The lock turns red. A newly established checkpoint in a timeline built entirely on massive lies. Walking away feels like carrying a mountain. The physical weight is nothing compared to the memory. Out of the sterile box and back into the cold reality. The job is never truly done. The architecture of silence. Built upon the fragile foundation of chemical lies and absolute erasure. The freezing air hits hard, a sharp reminder that you are still a functioning biological unit. Unlocking the mobile vault, the only place where the physical evidence of chaos is truly contained. A mobile arsenal of dissolving agents. The ultimate weapon against the stubborn persistence of reality, storing the heavy burden. The physical weight is gone, but the psychological toll remains firmly attached. Seal the tomb. The compromised environment is now fully secured behind solid, reinforced steel walls. The chemical high fades rapidly. You need harsh poison to forcibly shut down the screaming neurons. Swallow the burning static. It is a necessary friction to keep the mechanical system running smoothly. A temporary chemical shield. The only barrier between your operational mind and the absolute dark abyss. Movement equals survival. A static target is an eliminated target in this unforgiving architectural grid. The network watches constantly. Every intersection is heavily monitored to ensure your complete operational silence. The flashes begin to strike. Visual echoes of the dark reality you just erased from existence. You erase their physical shells, but their final desperate expressions are permanently burned into the retinas. Pushing the machine to its limits, trying to physically outrun a dark shadow permanently attached inside. Reaching the designated anchor point, a temporary pause in the endless cycle of structural erasure. The sudden silence is suffocating. It provides far too much space for the suppressed echoes to return. The physical drain is absolute. The body realizes the immense amount of energy spent hiding reality. Welcome to the void. A sterile, isolated box meant to temporarily contain a severely fractured machine. The relentless ticking of isolation. Every single drop is a reminder of the time slipping away. Removing the artificial shield. Preparing to confront the stranger staring back from the shattered glass reflection. The weight of invisible stains. You can scrub the surfaces, but the mind remains violently contaminated. The artificial shield is gone. Now you are forced to breathe the heavy air of consequence. The filter absorbs the toxic reality. But the internal system is already suffering massive structural failure. Shedding the secondary skin, the bare hands must now face the boiling temperature of absolute truth. Burn away the invisible residue. Pain is merely a physical distraction from the screaming psychological echoes. The water offers zero salvation. It only highlights the permanent cracks forming within the cognitive foundation. Circling the drain of sanity. Every drop pulled downward represents another fragment of a shattered identity. The mirror lies to you. It replaces your reflection with the cold statues you recently silenced, a glitch in the visual processor. The deleted files forcefully reinstall themselves into the active memory. Emergency protocol initiated. You must chemically flood the system to prevent a total psychological system crash. Swallow the liquid static. Let the burning friction overwrite the faces of those who went offline. Control is a temporary illusion. Eventually, the spinning stops and the harsh reality firmly settles in. Gravity always reclaims the architecture. You sink into the shadows, waiting for the chemical silence. Closing the eyes is a trap. The dark void serves as a massive projector for nightmares. Keep the visual sensors active. The blinding light is the only barrier against the internal dark. The poison finally takes control. The screaming anomalies are successfully muted by the heavy chemical static. The digital leash remains dormant. A fleeting moment of absolute isolation before the architecture demands payment. Achieve the absolute void. Become nothing more than an empty shell waiting for the next directive. You look at the vessel. It operates perfectly, but the core identity was deleted long ago. A temporary system hibernation. You sleep knowing the invisible stains will constantly bleed into the dreams. The ghost in the machine. A fractured psyche desperately trying to operate a heavily corrupted biological vessel. The physical cleanup ends, but the psychological contamination is permanent. The invisible residue permanently stains the core, a deeply fractured foundation. The heavy pressure of absolute silence inevitably shatters the underlying structural integrity. You try to reboot the system, but the corrupted files violently forcefully reinstall themselves without any warning. Closing the shutters is completely futile. The internal projector violently blasts the nightmares onto the eyelids. The chemical shield is depleted. The violently screaming anomalies are now actively breaching the primary firewall. The temporary armor is broken. The harsh reality violently spills out into the cold, unforgiving open space. The vessel is completely failing, fighting the immense gravitational pull of extreme psychological and physical exhaustion. You confront the absolute stranger in the glass, a perfectly functioning machine completely devoid of a soul. Apply thermal shock to the corrupted circuits. Force the screaming biological anomalies to temporarily power down. Searching the archives for a name. The original data was permanently overwritten by the unforgiving architecture. The shattered reflection confirms the truth. You are merely a collection of violently broken, disconnected fragments. The core identity file is completely missing. Only operational codes and designated target parameters remain intact. Absolute deletion of the self. The ultimate price paid to seamlessly erase the mistakes of the cartel. Pacing the sterile cage? The physical vessel functions perfectly, but the internal compass is permanently destroyed. The relentless march of a ghost, leaving invisible chemical footprints inside a completely sealed, sterile box. The architecture reaches into the void. The heavy, suffocating silence is violently shattered by a digital pulse. The digital leash violently pulls taut. The illusion of isolation is abruptly and permanently cancelled out. the machine effortlessly reclaims control. The fragmented biological anomalies are forcefully suppressed for the next deployment. A new set of coordinates, another massive structural failure that requires immediate, absolute, and total chemical erasure. The relentless cycle. A mechanical system does not get to choose when it powers down. Rebuilding the physical armor. The biological vulnerabilities are forcefully buried beneath heavy tactical layers, sealing the internal void. The uniform strictly dictates the function, overriding any lingering emotional hesitation. Muscle memory takes absolute command. You prepare for the next violent protocol without conscious thought. Replacing the contaminated lungs, fresh filters are strictly required to survive the upcoming toxic atmosphere. The artificial barrier is completely re-established. The human face is permanently replaced by a rubber void. Exiting the temporary sanctuary, the brief moment of isolation is immediately and violently revoked. Stepping back into the freezing current, the architecture heavily demands another massive structural cleanup operation. The metal permanently seals the vault. Whatever fragments of humanity remain are locked inside forever. Reconnecting with the mobile arsenal. The vehicle is simply an extension of your destructive protocol. The digital leash strictly provides the destination. You blindly follow the glowing numbers into the dark. The heavy machine surges forward. Constant momentum is the only way to avoid crushing internal pressure. The glowing city blur rapidly flies past. None of these civilian lights apply to your existence. The architects of chaos observe silently. They create the massive failures that you must mechanically erase. Pushing the mechanical limits. Extreme speed is a vital necessity when the timeline is violently fracturing. Arriving at the designated grid coordinates. An isolated sector perfect for a massive structural failure. The vehicle forcefully stops. However, the internal mechanical system continues to relentlessly grind against the pressure. The outer perimeter is heavily guarded. A silent laser designates the exact point of ultimate erasure. Exiting the armored shell, the freezing wind forcefully carries the unmistakable heavy scent of primal red. The vault completely opens once more. The heavy tools of absolute deletion are violently summoned again. The wider radius. A massive structural failure requires an equally devastating chemical response to effectively conceal. The tools scale up with the chaos. The architecture demands a heavier burden for a larger mess. The atmosphere is completely saturated. A massive kinetic event leaves an undeniable heavy footprint firmly behind. The perimeter is fully secured. Whatever nightmare happened inside is now perfectly isolated from physical reality. The violet beam exposes the sheer scale. A catastrophic sequence of violent physical deletions occurred here. Pressurize the chemical solution. A manual override is strictly required to dissolve this massive scale of panic. Flood the foundation with toxic erasure. The heavy chemical burn is the only acceptable cleansing method. A violent chemical reaction. The physical evidence of desperation is aggressively melted into absolute, terrifying nothingness. Mechanical friction forcefully smooths the timeline. Erase the violent struggle until only blank, completely sterile stone remains. The metallic seeds of the chaos. Scattered evidence of multiple violently delivered kinetic impacts must be contained. Retrieve the spent currency of violence. Every single casing must be securely removed from the playing board. Empty containers of kinetic force. They represent the exact moments when multiple biological systems were permanently silenced. Calculate the exact trajectory of the chaos. Understanding the geometry is strictly vital for total structural concealment. Absolute material destruction. If the objects cannot be safely transported, they must be aggressively melted down entirely. The internal firewall violently breaches. The architecture cannot contain the massive psychological pressure of this exact scale. The static figures forcefully return. An entire gallery of erased targets silently surrounding the failing biological vessel. The electrical grid perfectly mirrors the mind. A violently unstable current struggling to maintain simple, basic illumination. The hallucinations are multiplying rapidly. The internal processor is completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of ghosts. The primary shield is completely shattered. You require an immediate, aggressive chemical reboot to successfully restore functionality. Force the harsh chemical override. The painful spike forcefully terminates the terrifying biological anomalies once again. The terminal protocol. You reach the end of the timeline, only to realize there is no exit. The chemical anchor holds. The massive system crash is temporarily averted by the painful, toxic injection. The architecture is satisfied. The massive structural failure has been completely and utterly erased from reality. a perfectly sterile blank slate. The Foundation forgets the tragedy, ready to absorb the next mistake. Pack away the heavy arsenal. The physical labor concludes, leaving behind only the permanent psychological weight. Seal the mobile vault. The dark reality is heavily contained behind reinforced steel and scrambled codes. Retreat back into the endless shadows. The biological machine flawlessly returns to the silent waiting grid. Time constantly moves forward. It does not care about the shattered timelines you leave far behind. Returning to the sterile box, the mechanical loop violently pulls you back to the isolated anchor. Stripping away the tactical layers, the severely exhausted biological vessel finally returns to the cold cage. The artificial shield is dropped. The severe physical toll is plainly visible on the broken hardware. Confronting the glass once more, you desperately search the shattered reflection for a fragment of truth. The glass offers absolutely nothing. It merely reflects a perfectly functional machine, completely devoid of identity. The archives are completely empty. The original name was permanently erased alongside the very first mistake. Absolute acceptance of the void. You're nothing more than a mechanical function for the cartel. The heavy silence violently returns, a brief, terrifying moment of isolation before the architecture demands payment. The signal violently breaches the silence. The dark architecture requires your mechanical services once again. A new mistake has been made. Another timeline requires immediate, violent, and total chemical erasure. The cycle violently restarts. Subscribe if you want to understand the terrifying cost of absolute silence. Hit the notification bell, because the next time a shadow falls, I will be the one cleaning it.